Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages. This is the real Jon Bravo MMA Experiment Show. My mission is to help to grow the sport, generating interest through interviews, and also growing my channel in the process, and to help generate interest in the sport through interviews with coaches, fighters, and doctors, anyone in the profession, anyone in the industry, anyone that can add a little insight. And there's a lot to go over right now. Like this past week, for example, let's get into it. It cannot be understated. Cannot be understated how awesome a win this was for Anthony Showtime Pettis at this point in his career, at this time. The way that this sport is shaping up to be, the weight classes, the divisions. In my opinion, it looks like we're going to have another division added to another weight division, another weight class added. Somewhere between 162 and 165. But in the meantime, with everybody jumping around and things going on, you've got a guy in Anthony Showtime Pettis who jumps up 15 pounds from where he's used to fighting. He's fought all the way down at 45. So he jumps now up 15 pounds up in weight from where he's used to fighting naturally, where he's held a title. And shocked the world, quite frankly, because everywhere that you looked, everyone that you spoke to, everyone that, and all the outlets and all the media, it had Wonder Boy running away with it. And all the reasons why: his size, his skill set, his stance, his speed. He's not known for his power, but he definitely has some power shots. He ran through the Robert Whittaker, the current champion. But in my eyes, that was a little more due to Whittaker's inexperience than it was Wonder Boy's experience, per se. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Wonder Boy. That was a great win. I just don't think it will happen again the same exact way if those two were to face each other. Another thing that you had to look at is that size and that stance and that awkward look that he gives to everybody, and he gets everybody chasing after him, and he usually changes the fight or lands his significant shots through a counter of some sort. That's just Wonder Boy. That's just his style. So to have a style like Anthony Showtime Pettis, which is considerably an aggressive, kick-heavy, head-heavy attack, had everybody in the whole entire industry, it seemed, believing that there was absolutely no way that Showtime was going to pull it off. Now, when you look at the coaching and you look at the team, Wonder Boy is known for being a striker. He was trained by his father. He's been trained by his father since he was 3 years old. He's a 5-time kickboxing champion. He did spend a little bit of time training, I think, with Ray Longo for a little while. But anyway, it really boiled down to the coaching. When you look at Duke Roufus, I mean, he's a master technician. I've grown up on his fights back in the K1 days, and I knew that going into that fight that they had to have some type of a game plan, which he did. My thoughts on the game plan were a lot different than what it turned out to be, but not by so much. See, I respect Anthony Pettis for his submission game. A lot of people don't know him for that submission game because he's known for the Showtime kick, of course, jumping off the cage, doing a spinning 360 kick and knocking your opponent almost out and winning that fight. That's what you're going to be known for. But his submission game is well above average. I thought that the game plan was going to be to attack the leg that was just, fairly recently surgically repaired. It's well known that Wonder Boy had undergone some leg repair surgery a couple of years back, and it was, as far as I'm concerned, it was the opening. It was going to be the opening for what Duke Roufus loves, which is the leg kick. So you have the leg attacks, and I knew he was going to open up. I knew there was going to be some more adjustment, starting off with either a jab or some type of a lead leg attack, like a jab leg uh, attack, such as there was. So he targeted that leg until instinctively he knew it was time to take over and start landing headshots. It just so happened the very first one that he happens to go for lands, and it lands square and perfect. Now, the question I have was brought up by Kenny Florian actually first. It seemed that there wasn't a whole lot of power that went into that shot. It seemed like more of a well placed shot than anything. Definitely one that Wonderboy didn't see coming, but definitely one that makes you question whether or not you should be in front of killers that he's in front of right now in that division, and then there's talk of him possibly going up a weight class. So, if you are falling victim to shots like those, not to say that wasn't a significant shot, it was a significant shot, but it just wasn't that powerful a shot to put him out the way that it did. And even him in his post-fight FaceTime live book, whatever, interviews were phenomenal. By the way, we love you, Wonder Boy, for what you do. He had such a great attitude in the hospital while he's getting checked out. But one thing that I thought was noteworthy the whole time was, he didn't really know what happened. He didn't have much memory of the night, actually a lot of the night. But as it started to turn, as the night started to turn, and you go through his FaceTime and his Facebook uploads, you see he could remember the first round perfectly. He remembered everything going into that first round, and he was confident. He said he was piecing him up, man. He was piecing him up, and he looked down his leg, and all he saw was that blood because he opened up Showtime's nose with some jab, I think it was. It was just a well-placed jab that bloodied Showtime's nose, and it really made the fight look closer than it was. And I think it did lend to Wonder Boy having that confidence a little. He was a little too overconfident there because he just he wasn't stepping out of range quick enough. And then, of course, the instinct of Anthony Showtime Pettis to, at that moment, realize to counter, he was going to have to use his environment, have to use the fence, and basically leapt off the cage and cross-hooked, shovel-hooked. I don't know what you call that. People are calling it a Superman hook. It really wasn't much of a Superman hook. I mean, I could see where you would see that's what it was, but his feet were placed in a very weird spot. I'm still trying to figure out what to call the punch. I'm sure it's going to get a name, the Anthony Showtime versus Wonder Boy punch, or something to that nature. But it was whatever award is given out for strategic game plan, execution of that game plan. Whatever awards they give out for that this year definitely needs to go to that team of Anthony Showtime Pettis, Duke Rufus, those killers over there. They're doing it right because at the right moment, their fighter went out there and closed the show. As Dana White, the owner, the former owner, and the current head of the company said, he did what Tyron couldn't do twice. The champion at 170 couldn't do twice. He did it in 2 rounds. And to go, like I said, to go down that list, you got Ellenberger, you've got Jorge Masvidal, you've got the list is long of guys that couldn't do that. Just an amazing game plan, just an amazing execution of that game plan for Anthony Showtime Pettis. Just a very quality win. But the question is, it wasn't very, very powerful of a shot. The question is, how How is Wonder Boy's chin holding up? The question is, how is Wonder Boy's chin? The question is, what condition is Wonder Boy's chin is right now? As it stands, coming out of this fight, how does he feel? Is he going to feel confident in that chin? Is he going to go into his next fight worrying about that chin? Is it time for Wonder Boy to retire? Especially with Tyron out of the way, I think there was a little bit more life breathed into his camp, into his career, because nobody really was going to probably give him the opportunity to get that belt, to go in there and try to get that belt a third time from Tyron. So with Tyron out of the way, it opened up a whole lot more possibilities for Wonder Boy. But at 36 years old, I was just going over some of the numbers, and I realized he's 36 years old. Is it worth it at this time and this point in his career to go on a run chasing after a belt when he could put his health potentially in danger? And I'm sure he has a family he has to provide for. I'm sure he has things that he has to think about. But that's the question that I pose, and let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. Let me know the answers. How do you feel? Was it Wonder Boy's chin? Was it the power of Anthony Showtime Pettis? Was it just the placement? Was it just the perfect punch? What was it? What was it exactly that effectively ended Wonder Boy's night and possibly his career? Maybe even at 185. Let's go on to the next fight. But I just, before I go into the next fight again, I just want to state how amazing that performance from Showtime Pettis was. It definitely fit his name. That's why one of the bits of note is that he did get the Performance of the Night award, which was $20,000 from Reebok. Now, I don't know. That's another part of the show. This is another part of the channel that I'd like to work out is how much do fighters actually make? How much can you make as a professional prize fighter? Is it more lucrative to be in the UFC? Is it more lucrative to be on an amateur level? Is it lucrative at all? These are some other questions I want to answer, and I don't think I have enough information. There's not a lot of information readily available, at least that I could see right away in my search recently that shows this type of information, but I'd like to make that a part of our discussion is the fighters' salaries and what they make. Some channels I've seen do it, but again, if you know, hit me up in the comments section. I'm definitely going to respond and to help grow the channel and help to make things a possibility. So again, thank you, Showtime Pettis. This whole fight card delivered. But when you talk about the fight card, you usually have to start off with the main fight, and that gave me all the all the material that I could ever want, in talking about a main event. Okay, so moving on from there, you've got Curtis Blades versus Justin Willis. Now, I was interested in seeing this happen. I mean, who doesn't like to see the heavyweights get down, especially these two? Justin Willis is on a tear right now. Justin Willis seems to be just everybody that he gets in the ring with, he seems to be just knocking out. The one thing I want to make note of in this particular instance, we all know that mental warfare is a huge part of this fight game. Conor McGregor showed more than anybody the advantage that you can have by beating your opponent mentally. You can beat the opponent mentally before the fight even starts. Conor McGregor showed that on multiple occasions in different weight classes, I think. Not many people could play that game as well as he does. It's an intangible thing. It's that thing you don't see. How important is this thing that you don't see? In relation to the money, you can see there's a little bit of money in this, $20,000 for performance of the night, things like that. I've seen reports, John Jones and Anthony Smith from their fight. I think Anthony Smith got $350,000, and John Jones almost a $500,000 for their fight. Which I thought was very lackluster, but that's going back to a past fight, just to relate how much they're making into relation to their performances. Last night was well worth the price of admission. It's part of the ESPN Plus app. It was a free with a subscription fight if you had it. It wasn't a pay-per-view event. I myself, being a fan, I think you have to have all of the subscriptions to everything to really enjoy it. But if you're just an ESPN Plus subscriber, that was a phenomenal fight to watch for the main event. And then going to the co-main event, which was Curtis Blaydes and Justin Willis, it's a heavyweight slugfest you're hoping for, but Curtis Blaydes is known for his wrestling. This is something Justin Willis is not known for, is his wrestling. He's a former offensive tackle, I believe, and what became clear immediately to me was their size difference. Justin Willis is like 6'1", 265 pounds, they were saying, and Blaydes is 6'4", or something like that. So there is a huge size difference. Justin Willis is just a fat meatball of a person, and tried to, because he knew that he couldn't beat the man physically. He tried to implement this mental warfare, and recently on the Ariel Helwani show, when Curtis Blaydes was on there, he was talking about getting heckled by fans at the hotel in Nashville where the event took place in Nashville, Tennessee. He was getting harassed by fans, these guys from Instagram and Facebook, these guys that get into the DMs and start sending them messages and threatening them in hopes that they'll do something so they can then turn around and file a lawsuit. One of these people that actually had an instance with Curtis Blaydes somehow magically turns up at this event in Nashville, Tennessee, at the hotel, and walks up to Curtis Blaydes before the fight. By the way, this gentleman was reported by Curtis Blaydes to be about 6'1", 180 pounds if he's lucky, and basically told Curtis Blaydes, "What's up? I'm here to fight you." Nobody knows how he got there, where he came from, but it was very clear that in the beginning, from weigh-ins, Justin Willis began to implement this mental warfare thing, and he started, when he noticed that Curtis Blaydes was there with his father, he saw that he has a close relationship with his father. He immediately attacked that by saying, "Your father can't help you in there. Your daddy's not going to be able to help you. I'm going to make you my daddy, and I'm going to have you calling me Big Pretty and all this." I thought it was very, very tasteless, okay? I have to respect the mental warfare game because I realize that it is a part of this, but his was just absolutely tasteless, absolutely no creativity. It was just garbage. I think he went after Curtis Blaydes thinking that it was going to make a difference, and if anything, it hurt him. If anything, it hurt him because Curtis Blaydes stuck to the game plan. He didn't get emotional at all during the fight. He saved up all his emotions till after the fight. But during the fight, he was able to keep a cool head. He was able to implement this game plan. They knew going in there that Willis could not wrestle. They had never seen him wrestle. Only heard him talk about he could wrestle. Somebody must have talked him into it. Somebody must have told him that he could wrestle, but because they put him in there with one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division. And what happened is basically what we thought was going to happen. He was going to get out wrestled, and the only reason he didn't get his face smashed into pieces was because he knew that when he was in there, how to hook the glove. And Curtis Blaydes wasn't able to verbalize it to the ref during the fight, but the whole entire time that he was slamming Justin Willis, Roman Grecos and pop slams and just earthing Justin Willis every chance that he had. The only thing that saved his life that night from getting his face rearranged by elbows was the fact that he was hooking on the gloves. So, veterans will understand what that is. I mean, it's not too difficult to wrap your mind around it. When you're down there and you're wrestling with each other, you can't really get your hand up in the air if the guy is hooking onto your gloves with his fingers. So you can't raise up your hands to throw strikes or even land elbows. So that's what Justin Willis was doing that whole entire time they were on the ground. At some point, I think the ref, Keith Peterson, caught on to it and started warning him. But, of course, that's how the fight played out. Justin Willis continued to get slammed around the entire night and somehow walked away with $4,000 of Reebok money. I think he robbed Reebok. I think he tried to cheat, and he looked like a retard in all right, edit out that. We can't say retard. And he made himself look like a fool in the process. So after that fight, you have a fight that I myself was particularly interested in up until some recent news, which only added to the chaos of this division with Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw, and we're going to get to some of that news here in a minute, but the winner of Formiga and a lot of people don't know who Davison Figueiredo is, and that's because they don't know how to pronounce his name like I don't. But he, up until this fight, was undefeated. I think it was 13-0, and another one that was just smashing wins out and just an absolute killer in that division. And it's so clouded and it's so murky down there right now in that bantam and that featherweight flyweight division. But that particular fight, I expected to play out a little bit differently. I myself expected Figueiredo to win that fight, and Formiga was able to pull out the decision. He wasn't able to finish Figueiredo, which didn't surprise me, but it was just it didn't really answer the questions. That particular fight didn't really answer the question that I wanted it to answer for myself in who the next contender was going to be. I would like to see them run that one back, to be honest with you. After that one, you have the most surprising of all of them, turned out to be a bore fest, was the Makdessi fight. Jonathan Makdessi versus Jesus Pinedo. Yeah. Makdessi's known for his excitement. He's known to be an explosive fighter. But it turned out that fight was just an absolute snore fest. Luis Pena, what can I say about that one? It was another decision, just another snooze fest. Steve Peterson, to his credit, he tried to make it exciting. He tried to make a fight out of it, but Luis Pena came in 6 pounds overweight. I think that should be discussed, and I don't think he should have been even allowed to fight. But whatever, he's just trying to be a bully, and he's down there bullying these little guys. So he got his way in that regard, and he was able to eke out a decision over Steve Peterson. Congratulations. So the Reebok money on that was, for both of them, $3,500. Somehow Jonathan Makdessi got $15,000 for that fight, that bore fest. And the fight that was even more exciting than those two was the beginning of the card, the Macy Barber and J.J. Aldrich fight. I don't normally get excited over female fighters until I've seen a good body of work from them, but I saw an absolute vicious attack from Macy Barber when she was just destroyed Hannah Cifers the last time she fought. And I have to say, she's just an exciting fighter. She's fun to watch. And I've watched her body of work, whatever is accessible on YouTube, and she's just very exciting. She loves to throw hands. She's great with elbows, and she's a born finisher. Well, she saw her first bit of trouble. She got dropped actually in the first round. J.J. Aldrich was staying very tight, very close, and very compact, and she was able to land a clean enough left cross that actually dropped Macy Barber in the first round. Between the first round and the second round, Macy Barber was able to also keep her composure. It's another testament to somebody somebody else who saw some adversity and was able to keep the emotional composure. It's very important. be mentally strong in this game, specifically, in that at that level. So she, at that moment, decided to make the change, the adjustments in the second round. And Pat Barry, please, he was there cornering J.J. Aldridge. Pat Barry, we love you, but you are too loud. You're giving away. Why would you scream out why do you yell out the game plan? I don't understand these coaches. Did you not coach the fighter up before the fight? Is this the first time that you guys are speaking? Why can't you see what Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn are doing when they're in their corner, or Duke Rufus, and they're in their corners and they're quietly talking to their fighter? The whole world is exploding and there's noise everywhere and there's people around them. Everybody's yelling, but they're speaking to their fighter. They're talking, they're communicating to their fighter in a very calm and a very, very monotone voice. Those are the champion cornermen, it seems to be, in my eyes. So she was able to make that adjustment, Macy Barber, and come out and actually finish her in the second round. Somehow she ends up with $3,500, and J.J. Aldridge ended up with $4,000. Now, again, I'm not clear on how these numbers work, but thanks to Ben Askren, apparently it has to do with your longevity in time intrinsic to the contract. In other words, the longer that you're a UFC fighter, the bigger your Reebok money will be. Okay. So that was a recent fight. It was an amazing fight. It was a great card. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about, though. I mean, very recently we've heard a lot of this stuff about Tony Ferguson. He's obviously going through it. He's obviously going through a hard time. And I think that that's something that we can all relate to. He's suffering mentally from the pressures of life, the pressures of things. He's a successful person financially. He doesn't have to worry about his future or his children's future, for that matter. There's something there, though. There's an added pressure to a fighter at that level, and I think it's notable that Dana White at the end of the event made sure to let Tony know that he was sorry. He apologized for what he would call a bad joke when he made light of the situation when Tony lost his title shot due to that knee injury that he suffered. I mean, let's face it, he suffered it doing media obligations, so it was an at-work injury, and he couldn't fulfill his end of the contract and show up for the fight. So he lost his shot at the belt again due to the workplace obligation. That's something we might be able to unpack later, but at least as it stands, I mean, you could just see there's just a lot of pressure on you if you're a guy like Tony Ferguson. You're at a point in your career where you need to get that belt. Everything culminates to this point, and then you're sidetracked by an injury. And then somebody else comes in and takes everything that it seems like you've been in line for this whole entire time. For, if you ask a lot of fans, people still think that Tony's the champ to this day. I think if you ask Tony that, he'll tell you the same thing. He's been the champ this entire time, and a lot of us would have a hard time disagreeing with him on that. But I just think that the pressures of his job in general, just the pressures of life, are part of what's getting to him. Bobby King Green, he's another UFC fighter, a middleweight fighter. He made note of Tony and his, hearing about some of his habits and some of the things that he's doing. And he's from California. And he said that he's familiar with that behavior, that he's heard of that or he's seen it before, and that when people get to playing with tape and messing around with tape and restoring things and fixing things and messing around with things like that, that drugs are, quote unquote, drugs are a component of that, Is that something that we're seeing? Could it be some type of a performance enhancing drug that's making him do this? we did see a dramatic change in him very recently. We saw his body change, and we've seen a recent change in his overall aggression. And I'm getting surprised more and more nowadays by the guys that are actually getting away with it. I mean, that leads me kind of into the next story a little too early, because I want to talk about TJ at the end of this, but obviously we've had that recent surprise with TJ relinquishing his belt. Um, so, that brings up a lot of questions for me as far as TJ's career. But now are drugs a component of Tony Ferguson's career, taking a nosedive? Part of the pressure, part of this, part of that. The only reports that we've gotten were from his wife that said that there was one occasion where he had changed the locks while she was away, didn't give her a chance to get the key or something like that. She didn't have access to the house. She had to call police to get access back to the house. The police saw that everything was fine and realized that it was just a silly mistake, and they left. That is so far the only report that I know to be true. I don't speak to anybody in the camp or anybody there, but I listen closely to the Twitters and Facebook and all that. And what it seems like is, that's as much as I can verify myself to be true, as far as his condition is. But there is some type of a condition. There is something going on because, again, Dana made a point after the fight, after that amazing performance, and after congratulating Anthony Showtime Pettis on what he did. He made it a point to basically apologize for making a bad joke in regards to Tony's leg. Tony, of course, receiving an injury, knocking him out of contendership for the belt a couple of years back. So before I talk about the TJ issue or TJ story that's popping, I wanted to talk about Rockhold. Luke Rockhold actually just jumped up to 205. He just got a fight with Jon Blachowicz, and that's going to be his first outing at 205. Now, as I said before, you've got Anthony Showtime Pettis, who just went up went up a weight class to face Wonder Boy and get this big, huge win, one of the biggest, best wins of his career, going up a weight class. You have Amanda Nunes. You have all these fighters going up a class, and then you have some going down a class, but changing classes and just going after different belts and things like that. Luke Rockhold now making the jump to 205. He's scheduled to fight Jan Blachowicz at UFC 239. Now, in an interview with Ariel Helwani, Luke Rockhold said that the fight was offered to a few different people, and Gustafsson being one of them, Alexander Gustafsson being one of them, although they couldn't get the fight done because Alexander can't fight outside of Sweden. If I understood Luke correctly, he couldn't fight Alex. They couldn't put the fight between him and Alexander Gustafsson together because Luke Rockhold was unwilling to fight overseas. He'll fight at 205, but he's unwilling to fight overseas. He's not going to make his debut fight overseas. He wants to do it here on home soil. So he made a comment to the effect that Alexander Gustafsson can't come over here to the U.S. Now, I don't know if that's true. Is that true? Is Alexander allowed to fight outside of Sweden? I can't remember off the top of my head if he has fought, here in the U.S. recently. But if anybody does know, please let me know in the comments. And finally, I guess the big next one of the last things I want to talk about is the TJ thing. TJ. Tyler Jeffrey Dillashaw. TJ, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. Now, all we do know is that He tested positive for some substance, some banned PED is how it was described to me, banned performance enhancing drug. So it's not like he was caught smoking weed or anything as innocent as that. Um, it was serious enough for him to immediately relinquish the belt. Now, if you're suspended for a year, they're going to take the belt from you. It looks better just on your record. It's going to just look better if you relinquish the belt versus being stripped. So that's one reason that you do something like that. Another reason is damage control. You want to kind of get out in front of it, and before it has its effect, its true negative effect on what you're doing. Ray Longo had a near meltdown talking about it. Because during that entire time that Dillashaw is having this amazing run, he's all over Instagram, he's all over his social media platforms, bragging about his training regimens, and you see him in front of his breakfast, and there's about 50 different supplements, and him and that guy from the Training Labs place that also trains Michael Chandler and a few other fighters. So I don't think it's necessarily the trainer, although they tend to take a lot of the heat from this. Sometimes it's deflected directly to them from the fighter, but we don't know. That's the whole thing about this, is that we don't know. I just love hearing guys like Ray Longo talk about it, because there's a camp, there's a gym where you just don't get that from. You never got that from. Going back to the days of Matt Serra, they know what they're putting in their bodies. They're never going to get a shoulder shrug. You're never going to get a negative. You can test their blood from here until the next 7 years, and you're going to get the same result every time. And that's why it seems like Ray had a near meltdown the other day when he was talking about it, because you got TJ Dillashaw bragging all over the place about how great his training is and his training regimens are and his diet, and the fact is he was doing something wrong. He was, it just smells bad. It just doesn't look good. The more that we talk about this, the more that I hear about this, the fans are surprised. I myself was absolutely blown away. I've been in love with TJ Dillashaw and his career, and what he has managed to do in his time with the UFC is absolutely amazing. The title run that he went on, beating his son Sal after losing to him the first time, coming back to beat him a second time, then getting the belt, losing the belt to Dominic Cruz, going on a 4-fight win streak after that, getting the belt back from Cody, to knocking him out twice in the process to get the belt back. So he's held the belt a few times. It's just an absolutely sad situation when you think about it. Because as a fan of TJ, I didn't want to say that it was true, but when guys come out on social media, guys like Uriah Faber, now they are enemies, and we all know that they're not friends anymore, but they used to be. They used to be very, very close, and I think that that's worth noting, because Uriah Faber had a lot to say. Number one, congratulations, Uriah Faber. He's had a baby girl recently. He's recently a brand new father. He's a new man. He's thinking about picking up his career, dusting it off, and coming out of retirement. And he did speak about Dillashaw and fighting TJ, but at the same time, it doesn't matter to him. He's just a new person, and he's thinking about coming back and putting the gloves back on. But one thing he wanted to make, he did make a couple of jabs at TJ's direction. He said that he was surprised that for the last 6 years, nothing has been found, when Ariel Helwani was talking to him about it. And when Faber was asked about TJ, he said that, he wasn't surprised at all. He also said, to be fair, that he wouldn't be surprised to hear that there's an absolutely explainable reason, a great explanation as to why this happened. So he wouldn't be surprised if that was the case as well. But he did make note that ever since he knew TJ, going back 10 years, that TJ would step on his uncle's neck for a buck, quote unquote, step on his uncle's neck for a buck. This guy, TJ, would quote unquote step on his uncle's neck for a buck. So that's a pretty bad jab at somebody's character, if you ask me. But it also kind of gives you some insight, on what's going on there. There was also another story that Uriah started to tell about a cyclist that he used to train with. Taylor Louder, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but he started to tell a story about this cyclist that they all trained with back in those days that started to tell him, now he knew that him and TJ were hanging out and they started going places together and doing things together. And this cyclist who was now hanging out with TJ started to tell him about these performance-enhancing drugs and these things and these different illegal things that you can. As Uriah Faber, the way he explains it, as soon as he understood that it was a conversation about illegal substances, that he immediately just said, "Look, man, I don't want to know. I just want to have that deniability. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to have any of that information in my head, any of that negative energy in my head about it. I don't want to know about it." So if you go back to those days and you relive those moments, it looks really bad for TJ. Or we're all paranoid and it was just an accidental diuretic, like there are some people that are speculating. In some type of diuretic, it was accidentally implemented into his diet through some kind of a diuretic, since he was making that weight cut. And since steroids are usually there to help you get bigger, stronger, and faster, since TJ was trying to do the opposite, is it possible that this was just a mistake? Is it possible that this whole thing is just a mistake, despite all those comments, despite everything that was said about him from Faber, despite Ray Longo's, he didn't really have an opinion one way or another, but to me, that's an opinion. If you knew for sure that there was nothing going on over there, you'd be able to say so. But they're all surprised. Everybody's surprised, except for the people that are closest to TJ. Those are the ones that seem to be ahead of the game on this. And the next thing and the last thing I want to talk about on today's show is of course the biggest announcement in MMA news, and probably in the last week or two since the Showtime Pettis win over Wonder Boy, is Conor McGregor's tweet of retiring on Saturday night. And the questions that have been going around for weeks now. Brandon Schaub said it on his podcast maybe 2 days ago. Conor's not coming back. Conor's done. There is no scenario where he wins other than ego. If he goes in there and gets beat, it's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt his outside endeavors, what he's doing with his whiskey and whatever else it is that he's doing outside of the cage, movies and things like that. I'm sure he's going to maybe get a school. He's maybe own his own promotion. So any type of loss that he takes in a combative, even whether it's boxing or MMA, in a combative atmosphere, any type of loss that he takes is going to hurt him. It's going to hurt his reputation. It's going to hurt his brand that he's taken all this time to establish and made all these steps toward, and made all these steps for the sport in general. I can't understate enough that as well, how much Conor has done to make this sport big and to influence people to get into it, whether it's fighters or interviewers. There was just not very many people fighters in this sport that were able to excite people in the way that Conor was able to excite people. like Anderson Silva, um, guys like that. Anderson Silva, um, John Jones. I think these are just exciting fighters. Um, so I don't think it's a bad thing that he's gone. I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised by it, or a lot of people think it's a negotiation tactic of some kind. I mean, the guy's just got he's made more money than any other fighter. He's done more for the sport than any other fighter could think of doing. He's jumped weight classes. He's broken every rule. He's broken laws at this point. He absolutely has more to lose now by getting into the octagon than he has to gain, no matter what's the scenario. Even if he wins the fight, let's say he does get his next fight. If he gets his way and he gets his fight with Khabib, even if he wins that fight and does it this time in a classy way that people expect fighters to respect the Bushido, and even if he was to do this fight and do it in a different way and maybe even win it and win it in a respectful way, it's still not going to have a positive effect on his cash flow as much as a negative effect it would have if he lost. So to me, it's just never been. It's just never been. He hasn't been back in years. He hasn't been back since the last time we saw Conor was when he beat, in my opinion, was when he beat Eddie Alvarez. He wasn't even himself for the Floyd Mayweather fight, but I should say he was himself. What I should say is that he didn't change anything. He didn't improve. He stopped improving at the Eddie Alvarez fight. That was where he plateaued. He plateaued as far as his skill set was, and as far as what he was going to bring to the table. I think that's where it ended. And I got to say, it's been an absolute, you couldn't have written this career better. So from myself, I want to say thank you. From Jon Bravo, thank you very much, Conor McGregor, for everything that you have done. I hope you have a great and successful retirement. And that's it for my show, guys. I hope everybody liked it. But even if you didn't like it, tell me what parts of the show you don't like. I definitely asked a lot of questions in the middle of the show, and that's what's most important is getting the questions answered and finding out these things. And so whatever questions you have, make sure that you put them in the comment section. Like and subscribe. Support the cause. We want to get this sport bigger and bigger and grow with it. So like and subscribe. The next show that I've got planned coming out is to do a predictions of the next fight. We're gonna break down the next card and do for the Gaethje Barbosa. So we'll probably only be able to get to the main card fights, but that's the plan for the next show. So like and subscribe, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you